there is a custom. Hey, you know what? Can you pass me the Chumash? Let's have a look at it inside. The 10 sons of Haman. Here, look over here are the 10 sons of Haman. In the Megillah itself, they're written like this. Right? You've got this enormous gap in between the Ve'et, and their names, and they've got these unpronounceable names. I always say to myself, this is Haman's ultimate revenge, that the person who's reading the Megillah has to read all of these names in one breath, right? But if you read the names, they're not like John and Frank and Bob and Harry, right? They've got here. Look, it's like Parshadanta, Dalphon, Asvata, Porata, Adalia, Aridata, Paramashta, Arisai, Aridai, Vayozto. I mean, I think that Haman, whilst he was giving his names to his kids, obviously knew that something was going to happen to him, and he decided that this was going to be the ultimate revenge. So there is a custom to recite all of the names in one breath, and actually, really from the Chamesh Mois Ish, the 3 words preceding. And then it says Ve'et, and then Padashanta, and then all of the names, and the Bnei Haman ben Hamdasa. And at that point, when he says Haman at the end, everyone starts making a noise, and he can start, right, there you go, that was very good. And then he can actually get his breath back. If you're watching the person who's reading the Megillah, you'll see him, his face goes red, and then it goes blue, and, if at some point... Huh?
Sometimes CPR.
Yeah, whatever is required in order to get this done.
What's so special about this week's Parsha?
Oh, Pasha Zachar.
Yeah.
Oh, let's get to that. Let's talk about it momentarily.
Is that this week's Parsha?
It's not. It's a maftir. This week's Parsha is Tetzaveh, which is the regular order of the Parshiot. But at the end, they'll take out 2 Sifrei Torah, and the Parsha it's just a few verses that talk about Amalek of Zachor, which is a dioraisa. It's a Torah obligation to go to shul and to listen to it, and it's taken with the utmost seriousness, and the person reading it will read it very carefully and enunciate every word very clearly. And the last verse will be repeated because there's one word in there where it's not sure whether it's supposed to be zeicher or zeicher. Timches Amalek, or Zecher or Zeicher. So he'll repeat. The person reading it will repeat the whole verse all over again, and they're supposed to be complete and absolute quiet. Anyway, so that's what Shabbos. That's what's happening on Shabbos, and it's a dioraisa. It's a Torah obligation to come and listen to the Torah being read for Pasha Zachar, and it's always the Shabbos before Purim. Which again this year is as far away. They're as far away from each other as possible. But it is supposed to be. These are supposed to be read with one breath. The people are reading the Megillah as well. You'll see that there'll be a stop, and everyone will start reciting these names quickly. You should also, according to some opinions in the Halacha, you're supposed to do it in one breath as well. So you probably have to start practicing saying these names to be able to get them out, right, without fluffing it in the middle. Look, in the Megillah, you'll see some interesting things over here. The first interesting thing, which is very noticeable, is that at the end you've got these 9 names, and then a 10th name, of course, says "and," because that's what happens, right? When you've got a sentence, right? And Yozta, and the Vav of the "and" is written much bigger. Right, so inside of the Megillah, you'll see the Vav written much bigger than all the other letters over there, and the reason, explain the rabbis, is because the Vav represents the gallows that these 10 children were hung up upon. Right, if you see it, it looks like a gallows, it's sort of like long, and it's got a little hook on the end, and it says that they were all hung up together on the gallows over here. The other thing that we spoke about the other day was that some of the letters are written smaller, and that's to do, some people want to say that that's to do with the Nuremberg laws and the fact that 10 Nazi criminals, war criminals, were put to death. They were hanged in Nuremberg after the Second World War. Whether it's true or it's not true, it's a fascinating idea, that's for sure.
Can you tell us? Do you guys know? How?
I don't think it's true. I mean, the Megillah came first.
The Megillah came first, and for generations, there have been letters over here. So the Taf and the Shin and the Zayin are all written small, and there's never been really an explanation for why. That's just been the way that it's understood. That's the way that the Megillah is written.
I mean, how does that
The
allude to the Holocaust?
Taf, the Taf, the Shin, and the Zion in whatchamacallit, in Gematria works out in the years, works out to be 1947. And 1947 were the Nuremberg trials of the, bless you, of the top Nazi leadership.
It adds up to 1947.
It comes to
It's like we can't use that because it's English states.
Yeah, so it corresponds. The Hebrew year of Taf, Shin, Zion corresponds to the year of 1947.
Okay.
Right, and what they want to say is like this. Hold on, just 1 second. They want to say like this: that there were 10 criminals. Actually, there were 11. One of them committed suicide, and 10 of them were put on trial in Nuremberg. The reason why it was done in Nuremberg because that's where the original Nuremberg laws were proclamated against the Jews, and they felt that it was very symbolic to put the people over there in the World Court to put these Nazis on trial over there, and they were all sentenced to death and they were all hanged. The 11th one committed suicide, and some people want to say that corresponds. That was Hermann Goering. Corresponds to the daughter of Haman, who also committed suicide according to the oral tradition. Interestingly enough, I can't remember which one it was, but one of the Nazis that was let out, as he was at the last words that he said as they were putting the noose around his neck, was Purim Fest, which means Purim Festival. Again, what, why, who, which, when, I don't know. It's a fascinating idea. Is it possible that these letters have remained dormant for generations until after everything is now, you can look back and say, that's why they're there? It's definitely possible, right? I don't really know. It's a fascinating idea, yeah.
Surely one should say that the message of Hanukkah should actually be more relevant to Purim. What about publicising the miracle?
So interestingly enough, there is a dimension of publicising the miracle on Purim.
It should be more than Hanukkah because, in a sense, Purim was more of a miracle, maybe.
Well, it's interesting that the rabbis say like this, that there's the miracle of Hanukkah was a miracle which it had a different flavour to it. Right? So the Jewish people went out to war and they fought against the Greeks and they won and they rededicated the temple. The story of Purim is more to do with physical annihilation and the fact that we were saved from being destroyed by Haman and his cohorts. And so it's celebrated in a different way, right? It's interesting. The rabbis point out Hanukkah is a very spiritual dimension, which is why the mitzvahs of Hanukkah are all spiritual, right? Lighting candles, bringing light into the world. There are no physical dimensions really to the mitzvah of Hanukkah. So, for example, we don't have a mitzvah to eat on Hanukkah the way that we do on Purim. The mitzvahs of Purim are much more physically orientated.
Why, if that's the case, and that we're supposed to publicise God in a way during Purim, why do we dress up?
Why do we dress up? Because everything inside of Purim, the whole story of Purim is something which is, in a sense, everything is hidden away, right? Which means it starts with the idea that, Esther, Achashverosh doesn't know who Esther is. He's got no idea which nation she comes from. Everything is being done in this hidden way. God's name doesn't appear.
No, 100%, but what I'm saying is that with Purim, you kind of hide happiness. You get absolutely, you get drunk, and then you get dressed up so that it's not really you, and then you get so drunk that you don't actually remember who you are.
It's true. And you've done very well because you've waited at least 5 minutes today before talking about getting drunk.
I know. They don't like it. I don't like them.
You don't like getting drunk. So we'll talk about how to do it without getting drunk. You can do it without getting drunk. And for a lot of people, it might actually be recommended that they don't get drunk. We'll talk about it when we get there. But you're right. There is a dimension of Purim of stepping outside of yourself, or maybe stepping outside of the confines of yourself, in order to stretch the limits of your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with God. And that's very much, it's very much sort of tied up inside of the idea of being somebody who you normally aren't. So getting dressed up and then, perhaps getting drunk and not being completely in control of who you are. And hopefully behaving in a way that reflects that spiritual dimension. Doesn't always work, huh? Anyway, good. That's the 10 sons here. Now you can have it back now, and you can try to pronounce those names. I wish you the best of luck. What's interesting is like this. You'll see that when they start reciting, just before they start reciting the Megillah, so they'll take the Megillah and they'll unfold it, they'll unroll it, right? Because normally it comes just rolled up, and not like a Sefer Torah. Sefer Torah is rolled up on 2 handles. The Megillah is rolled up on 1 handle, so just, it's one great big roll of parchment. Pardon?
Do they call him up, the person reading it? Or?
No. They just he just comes up, and we'll talk about there are brachas that have to be recited before he reads it, but it's not called up like getting an aliyah to the Torah that you have when you get called up to the Torah. It's a lot less, it's less formal than that. The person who's reading it just goes up and starts reciting the blessings. But what you'll see is that the Megillah is completely unwound, and then it's folded up. So you'll take the Megillah after having unwound it, and you will fold it back on itself like this. Why are you looking at me? Look at my hands.
I've seen that. I thought that that's just how the guy likes to do it.
No, I mean,
symbolism in that?
Yeah, for sure. It's very symbolic. That's the way that it needs to be read, right? Even though the truth is, I think it's a little less comfortable, because when it's all rolled up, you could just pull it along, right, and unroll the bit that you need. But over here, you're unrolling the whole thing, and you're folding it back on itself the whole time. And the reason for that is because the Megillah is supposed to represent the original letter that was sent out to the Jewish people, telling them that everything was going to be okay. And the verse says in the Megillah, Ha'igeret hazeh, this letter, right? So the Mishnah Berurah says that, before we get to Mishnah Berurah, so the reason is that the whole thing is unfolded and it's folded up on itself to look, it's going to look like a letter, the way that a letter was delivered in those days, rather than a rolled up piece of parchment. Now, again, we're going to get to the brachas very soon, but there are brachas that are recited before the Megillah. There's a bracha that's recited at the end of the Megillah. The Mishnah Berurah does say that the person reading the Megillah should be careful to roll up the Megillah at the end before he recites a bracha, right, before he recites a blessing, because we're putting it back once we're, it's all being put back to its original state, and only then are you supposed to be making the bracha. Otherwise, it's considered to be a disgrace to the parchment, right? Leaving it all sort of unrolled and open like that. Good. Let's talk about banging at the time of Haman's name.
Or the audience interaction.
Thank you. No, I very much appreciate it.
In my temple, we do firecrackers.
Yeah? That's good. No, of course not. Are you kidding? No firecrackers.
Oh, I'm going to miss that.
No.
I'm going to take a bugle horn.
Yeah, that's good. And anything that makes an outrageous amount of noise is definitely recommended, for sure. There is actually a machlokes, of course, because we're Jewish, nobody can actually agree on anything. So there is a machlokes about whether or not one should make noise. You should make noise. You shouldn't make noise. The Ramah, the Chacham Tzvi, amongst other very important halachic authorities, they had that custom, and that's what they did. The Pri Megadim, amongst others, says that you shouldn't, because you shouldn't make a break in the reading of the Megillah. The Megillah is supposed to be read all in one go. Whatever you do, I would say just follow what the community is doing, which means you don't, some communities only make noise on the first Haman and the last Haman. But you've got to, never mind boring, you've got to, because it takes too long, because you've got to be careful.
A lollipop stick.
Plus people are,
Good.
People are fasting.
Stop and go.
Yeah.
People are fasting. Imagine the reader is like fasting. If you want to like sympathize with them, you stop it.
No, we don't want to sympathise with him.
Yeah,
For sure not.
He shouldn't be fast if he's being
What you'll find is like this. There'll be lots of noise on the first Haman. And you, right, thinking to yourselves, this is great, right? And we'll get to the second Haman, and you'll start making all this noise, and you'll be everyone will be looking at you. It's like,
what are you doing? It's like your house in the state of Misham.
Yeah, exactly, exactly the same. That's where the custom comes from, right? So I would just recommend, just keep an eye out for what's going on, right? If everybody's making noise, then make noise. And if people are not making noise, then don't make noise. That would seem to be the...
How does that work again?
Like I said, if people aren't making noise, then don't make noise. And if people aren't making noise, then make noise. Something like that, whatever. Yeah, good.
Do Derek do separate Megillah readings, please?
I don't know. You have to wait and see what's going to happen over here. But, whatever. It's normally in the yeshivas, it's normally a pretty joyous affair. And it's probably got lots of noise going on, I'm sure. So please come armed appropriately with things that are going to cause maximum inconvenience to everybody. There are 3 brachot which are recited before the Megillah is read. Right. The first one is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam. Asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al mikra Megillah, which means that we're making a bracha over the reading of the Megillah. Now, the person who's reading the Megillah, he's going to make the brachot. We, the people who are listening, have to answer Amen, and that's going to fulfill our obligation. He's going to read for us. Therefore, we answer Amen. You should not say Baruch Hu uVaruch Shemo when he says the name of God. Right? You should just wait until he finishes the entire bracha, and then you say Amen. The second bracha is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, she'asa nisim la'avotenu b'yamim hahem bazman hazeh, and we thank God for having done miracles for our fathers in those days, bazman hazeh, now in these days as well. Right, which means it's a very significant bracha. It's a bracha which is recited also when we come to light the Hanukkah lights. The underlying theme of the bracha is that we are not commemorating Purim simply because of something which happened a long time ago, and we're just commemorating it because it was a nice thing to do, but rather it's got an impact on us today as well, which is when we come and we say Bayamim Hahem Bazman Hazeh, that not just in those days, but Bazman Hazeh, in these days as well, we need to recognize that God is together with us, and we need to recognize that whatever happened then is something which HaKadosh Baruch Hu was looking after the Jewish people in Shushan. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be looking after the Jewish people all over the world today as well.
Right. So I believe that this wasn't the only time that the Jews were on the border of annihilation, right?
Yeah.
So why is Purim special?
Why is Purim special? I think for 2 reasons. First of all,
it was
this
in
is
Persia.
this
I
is
know. It's
this is it was the vast majority of the Jewish people, all concentrated in one place, in one empire, which means that everybody was under threat all at once, right? The other times that we've had where Jewish communities have been under threat, even countries have been under threat, but you don't have everybody under threat at the same time. That makes Purim rather unique. And aside from that, also is because of the time period. We're talking about a time when we've still got the men of the Great Assembly, the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah. We've also got some Nevi'im. So Mordechai is a prophet, is a Navi. We've got people there at the statue who are able to introduce a commemoration for everybody, for all generations. What is fascinating about Purim is that there are different communities that have their own Purims, right? For things that have happened, miraculous things that happened within inside of the community, and they were saved from a particular danger, and then they commemorated that day as being their Purim. And there are still communities today that have such, dotted throughout the year, on that particular community, on that particular day, they'll have a Purim-like celebration. It won't.
In addition to this,
This Purim that we've got is for everybody, right?
What's
You
the-
can't
what's the example
wriggle
of
out of it.
communities?
Yeah, Casablanca, for example, the community in Casablanca had there was a period of, I can't remember when it was, but there was a period of great danger, and they were miraculously saved from the danger, and they commemorate that day. Again, I don't know, the Casablanca community, of course, is not, I don't think it's particularly concentrated in any one particular place anymore, but people that come from that original community, so there's a day in the year which they look at as being a special day. So what do? They gather together. They don't say Tachanun on that day, which is the prayers that are recited on a regular day, to commemorate the destruction of the temple. And they'll get together. They'll say prayers of thanksgiving, and they'll eat a suda. I mean, we're Jewish, right? So there's got to be food there somewhere.
Why
It's
don't
like
all Jews celebrate that?
because I think again because it was something which was particular to a particular community. They looked at it as being their own personal Purim.
So is the idea that all Jews today eventually descend? You can trace them back up to the community in Persia that this happened to. Is that the idea?
Most. There was a small community in Israel at the time. Again, you have to remember, according to the Megillah, Achashverosh was the emperor over the majority of the discovered world at the time.
I think including
Right.
Israel.
Including Israel, yeah.
So yeah.
So, for example, even post Achashverosh, we spoke about Daryavish the other day, Darius II. He had to give permission for the Jews to be able to go back and to start rebuilding the temple in Israel, because Israel was under the Persian Empire. It belonged to the Persian Empire, which means that, again, you've got a situation where there is an enormously powerful king who's ruling over huge amounts of land, and inside of all those different countries, you're going to find the Jews dotted around everywhere. There was, if my memory serves me correct, which is not something I would recommend you rely upon, actually.
If it doesn't say Shechianu.
I think there's also in Krakow. I think they also had a thing when the city was under siege during one of the many wars, and I think it was Krakow when the Jews gathered together in the main synagogue, which had very thick walls, and it took some direct hits from cannons, and nothing actually happened to anybody. And they also celebrated that day as being, like their own sort of personal Purim. Whatever. There is a third bracha as well, which is recited, which is the bracha Shechianu. Now, the bracha Shechianu is a bracha which maybe you'll be familiar with. It's a bracha that's recited when you do something, you haven't done it for a while, something new is happening, whenever there's a Yom Tov, we recite Shechianu. Over here on Purim, we recite Shechianu as well. We're going to recite it twice. We're going to recite it once at night for the reading of the Megillah at night, then we're going to recite it again in the morning for the reading of the Megillah in the morning, even though we read the Megillah at night and it's the same mitzvah that's being repeated. However, because there are mitzvahs during the day of Purim that have to be done. So, for example, we'll talk about them, but you've got to give Mishloach Manot, you've got to give Matanot Levionim, right? You've got to give charity, you've got to give gifts to your friends, if you have any. Then and you have to drink. You have to eat the suda. So you have to drink the suda. That was a Freudian slip. You have to eat the festive meal. So when you come to make the Shechianu in the morning, when the person who's reading the Megillah makes the Shechianu, we should all keep in mind, when we answer our main, we should keep in mind that the Shechianu is for all of the mitzvahs on the day of Purim as well, not just for the reading of the Megillah. Good. There's a fourth bracha, which is recited at the end of the Megillah. So again, the Megillah has been read, everybody has had a grand time, you have managed to use your bugle and your foghorns and whatever else, whatever other evil and wicked, weapons you have available.
Whoopee cushions?
Put one on the rabbi's chair.
No, that's too much. Yeah,
Put it in the cousin's chair.
Yeah, that's
you do it.
too much.
No, I'm fine. It's too much.
So after the Megillah has been re-rolled, the bracha is Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam akel arav et Reuven v'dan et dinenu v'anokem et nikmatenu v'mishalem gmul l'chol oivei nafshenu, v'nifra lanu mitzarenu, baruch atah Hashem, akel hanifra la'amo Yisrael m'chol tzarem, akel amoshia. Which means, what does it mean? What are you saying? That God takes up our grievances, judges our claim, avenges our wrong, brings just retribution upon all the enemies of our soul, exacts vengeance from our foes, who exacts vengeance from the people for his people Israel, from all their foes, the God who brings salvation. Why are we making the bracha? We don't normally do that, right? You make the bracha at the beginning of reading a Megillah. Every other Megillah that we read during the year, there are another 4 Megillahs that we read. You don't make a bracha at the end, you just make the brachas at the beginning. Why are we making the bracha over here in Megillah Esther at the end? So the idea is because the name of God doesn't appear inside of the Megillah at all, so we're underlining again that everything that happened was divinely inspired, which means we shouldn't make the mistake of thinking that some kind of random series of events took place and we ended up getting out, without being destroyed, but rather everything is being done according to God's plan. The Chofetz Chaim writes that if a person is reading the Megillah by himself, then he should not say the last bracha. That's only something which should be said when there's a minyan, right? When you've got a minyan of people coming together to hear the Megillah, then you should say the bracha. Otherwise, you shouldn't. There are other opinions inside of the halacha. For example, the Aruch HaShulchan, who says that you should, even though it's only a minute to recite the bracha, you should recite the bracha even when there's less than a minyan present.
Even one? Even one person? Or over than one?
The Aruch HaShulchan says that even a person reading by himself should say the bracha. The Mishnah Berurah says no. So whatever you do, yesh ami lismoch.
Right.
Every topic in the Judaism is like this.
So we have an eternal covenant God made with Abraham, right?
Yeah.
So based on that, the Jewish people are going to be an eternal nation, right? So therefore, I see the miracle of how this happened, but didn't we have a guarantee from the Torah that not all the Jews are going to die? So
Yeah. Although I tell you
about?
what, the thing is like this: that the pact that took place between God and Abraham was conditional, which means God says to Abraham, "You keep my Torah, I'll keep you." Right? And again, the only thing that helps ultimately over here with the story of Purim, the only thing that helps change everything around, of course, is the Jewish people doing tshuva. Which means that when the Jewish people come back to God, there's a whole series of things going on over here, right? Which means that the Jewish people only do tshuva when they finally realize that they don't have any other alternative, which means that they do their best not to. They try everything else except for doing tshuva. When they finally do tshuva, what has happened? One of the things that have happened is that Esther is their big, the great white hope is Esther. She's in the palace. They're convinced that Esther's going to take care of everything. And then what does Esther do? She goes and invites Haman and Ahasuerus, who are the two enemies of the Jewish people, to come to a tea party. Right, and at that point, they don't know what's going on over here. They're like, the Jewish people are very, very concerned. All of a sudden, that this Esther that they were relying upon, it seems that you can't rely upon her anyway. And at that, only then do they really begin to rely upon God. Which means that once they take away their dependence upon human beings and they depend on God, then at that point everything is going to turn out to be okay. Got it?
Yeah.
Good.
So there's a chance of Jews being, if let's say everybody sins and doesn't keep the Torah, we could lose our eternality.
We can, our eternality. We can't lose our eternality because God will engineer things. It's a great word, right? God will engineer things to make sure that we don't have any other alternative but to return to Him. Now, again, what's the problem? The problem is like this. There are two ways of returning to God. One of them is relatively painless, right? It's not easy, that's for sure, but it's relatively painless, which is to turn to God and to do what God wants us to do. willingly, right? Which means, that the Jewish people should decide, hey, you know what? Maybe this isn't such a bad idea after all, and perhaps we should really do what God wants us to do. And at that point, everything will be great. The Mashiach will come, and we probably won't have to have these classes anymore, which is already something to daven for, right? The other alternative is that if we don't recognize what our obligation is, we don't recognize what needs to be done, then there is a time that has been set aside where God wants to bring the Mashiach anyway, and in order to get us to the point where we're ready to greet the Mashiach, that's going to involve a lot of upheaval and trauma, and it's going to be very, very painful for the Jewish people. And that's what's called in the language of the Nevi'im, of the prophets. That's what's called Milchemes Gog uMagog, that final confrontation, which will be something incredibly painful, incredibly enormous. It will spread out over the world, and it's something which doesn't have to be. Right? If we, the Jewish nation, would recognize that it doesn't have to be, and if we would do something about it, then we don't have to go through that terrible experience. We really don't. But of course, we're a contrary nation.
Where's the passage or pasuk? Is that what it's called? That says that if we don't keep the Torah by the time the Mashiach comes, he's going to come anyway, but it's going to be painful. Like, where does it?
It's based on different psukim inside of the prophets, Zechariah, Yechezkel. But it says like this. One of the famous psukim is a pasuk in Yechezkel which says that the Mashiach will come bi'ito ba'achishena, which literally means in its time, unexpectedly, which does make a lot of sense, right? Achishena means like in a rush, in its time, in a rush, which doesn't make any sense. So the sages learned from that the Mashiach, there are two different ways of bringing the Mashiach. If it's going to be be'itoi, if it's going to be in its time, that God set aside this time when the Mashiach has to come, and then, if we're not doing what we're supposed to do, then that's going to trigger off a divine response before the Mashiach comes, which will be very nasty, right? Or Achishena, which really means that we could bring the Mashiach right now. Right? The Jewish people can bring the Mashiach this moment if we would only do what we're supposed to do. There's a very poignant. The Gemara says, I've forgotten which rabbi it was, but the rabbi meets Eliyahu Novi. He meets. He meets Eliyahu Novi. He meets Elijah, and he says to him, "When is the Mashiach going to come?" And Elijah says to him, "Today." And the next day he bumps into Elijah again, and he says to him, "You lied. You said he was coming. He never came." And Elijah says, "No, he'll come today if you want to bring him." Which means the Mashiach is not, it's not, we have this sort of like this idea that we can carry on ignoring what God wants us to do, and somehow or other that's going to bring the Mashiach. He'll come, and it's going to be great, and it's great, right? It doesn't work like that. Which means either I always say like this: the coming of the Mashiach is going to be preceded by trauma, lots and lots of trauma. The question is, what trauma? That's our choice. It can be internal trauma, right? So I don't have to explain to you the trauma of a person deciding to change his life around and to become orthodox and to follow the Torah laws. And it's hard. It's very hard. We all know how hard it is, right? That's one kind of trauma. And if we're not going to have that trauma, then it'll be an external trauma, which is going to be something pretty bad. Right? Again, what's called in Christian writings, that's what's called Armageddon. And even in the Christian writings, it's something which is awful. In the Jewish writings, it's something which is even worse than that. Whatever. I think we should just do tshuva and for sure. That's what I think.
Skip all the external trauma business. Just get on with it.
I think so. But again, it's just my opinion. I'm not suggesting over here. I'm not forcing anybody over here to do tshuva. Please feel free to to either bring the Mashiach in a beautiful and non-traumatic way, or if you prefer that the Jewish nation be put into tremendous danger, then feel free not to do tshuva. And right, great choice, huh? Okay, one last halacha for today, which is going to be difficult for some people, and that is that you're not allowed to talk from the beginning of the brachas until the end of the brachas. The Megillah, you're supposed to listen to every single word.
My minchag says differently.
Sorry?
My minchag says
Yeah,
differently.
I think not just yours, actually. What's the problem? If somebody were to talk in the middle of the Megillah, then they would have to listen to the Megillah all over again. Right? The minute you've missed words inside of the Megillah, then you've lost your place, and you've got to go back to the beginning and start all over again. And if the person who's laning the Megillah were to talk in the middle of the Megillah, the person who's reading it would talk in the middle of the Megillah, then it's got to go back, and everybody's got to listen to the whole thing all over again as well. Right? So leave the person reading the Megillah alone. Right? Don't distract him. If you've made a mistake, if a mistake was made, so you could just go back and repeat, right? But if a person speaks, which means that's it, they've gone off into a different direction altogether.
What if you off of the stender and you miss a word? You just have to read that word.
Yeah.
But if you speak, that's a separate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what if
Can you not say, for example, please can you be more quiet?
No, but you can say shh.
what if the guy leaning talks?
That's it. Everyone's going to go back to the beginning.
Shut the last word.
Probably stone him or something. I would imagine. You know, where.
Imagine he gets to the last word. Hey, what up? And then
Yeah, he's gonna be a popular guy, right? Good. Okay, we're gonna stop over here in Mitz Hashem, and tomorrow we'll maybe we'll finish up. I don't know. We'll see.